Sandy Shortt for the Hastings Historical Society's Oral History Project. Today's date is August 2nd, 1988. August, we'll do a little test and see how it's working, and why don't you tell me your name?
My name is Robert Spiegel. Lived all my life in Hastings. 57 and 58 years now.
What's your birth date?
July 4th, 1930.
Ah, terrific. Okay, here we go. So, you were born July 4th. Where?
Yonkers General Hospital at 11:45 in the evening of July 4th. Just made it. And the doctor was Dr. Greenfield, an eminent Yonkers physician. At age, I think it was about 10 months, we moved to Hastings, and we lived at 81 Rosedale first, and then we moved to 1 Main Street, 32 Whitman Street, and 64 Ferndale, and the River Pines Apartments, which are now some other name, and then we got married. We lived at 1 Cliff Street first, no, at 59 Maple, in those apartment houses, then 1 Cliff Street, and then here. So
At
that's
6 Glen Place.
6 Glen Place, right. And I've been around, I worked for my father and his store on Warburton Avenue for a long, long time, till about 15 years ago, when I closed it up and went to work for a present employer, Norrell Paper, in New Jersey. And that's about it, unless you have any other questions.
Oh, sure, I'll have a whole bunch. Why did your family move to Hastings?
Well, my father opened a store,
Which
was across the bridge near Washington Avenue, where I believe it was where Dimonescu's barbershop is right now. Then he moved.
What kind of a store?
Butcher, meat market, and some vegetables. Then from there he moved across the bridge to where the Moonlight Mile is. Is that the name of it is now? And he had it's 533, right next to the drugstore.
The
drugstore and the pizza place. And he remained there until 1941 when he built.
Was that the same kind of store?
Yes. Fruit, vegetables, and meat market.
What was that called?
Al's Market. And he was there for a long time, and then he bought the building where presently is Hastings Prime Meats, and he had a store there, which he took in groceries now, and made it into a small supermarket, which remained until it was closed. And, we've been around a long time. I see a lot of people now. I'm getting to the age where I'm seeing grandchildren of people I went to school with, and you reminisce, you look back a lot. I only wish that I took more pictures and wrote down more things so I could remember the good old days. I worked for my father, and when I was young, in high school, I delivered orders with a truck. I knew every inch of Hastings.
What year would that have been you were in high school? What years?
Let's see. In high school, I was 15, so it's 19. Through the war years, from Second World War, 1942 on, I would say. I used to not drive, but I would go with the driver and deliver orders. And then when I got my license, I learned on our truck. And I used to deliver the orders. Then I went and worked in the store, opened the store in the morning because there was a shortage of help and everything like that. So my job was to open the store at 7:30 in the morning, stay there till 8 o'clock, and then I would go to school and get out at 3:30 or 3, whatever the time was, and come down to the store and work some more, and then go home with my father. And it was, all these things. I, look back at how Hastings has really changed and where houses are being built that were never thought that it could be done and stuff like that. I mean, this place, if you can envision it, was there was a lot of space between the houses, I mean, you go down to, there was no houses where Crossbar is, just James Street used to come down, there was a big swamp there, and then over where Mariana and the other place, there's nothing there. Before Ronnie Circle, there was like a park there or something. And you came up, there's houses, you go down some of these streets, you can see houses, old ones, and then you go down 3, 4 houses, and then there was another old one, and that's the way it was that I can remember it, And
the focus of this project is on the waterfront. Tell me, you lived down there for a while, is that right?
Well, we lived on Maple. That was about as close as we got. Mm-hmm. And I can remember as a boy swimming in the Hudson River.
Tell me.
There was places that you went to swim. I remember them. They were called. One was called the Point, and there's a little point. I probably could show it to you if I went down there. There was another place called the Third, which was the third place where they would swim. It was an easy access to the water, and we used to go down there and swim. And at that time, the Hudson was clean as a whistle. Right?
What years?
We're talking 42 through 49,
Mm-hmm.
War years. We couldn't go any place to go swimming, so we had to go find the next best thing. And all up and down there used to be a lot of people swimming there.
Could you define more specifically where the Point was and the Third?
There was railroad bridges there, and this was the third railroad bridge. So and there was, I don't think they're there. No, we went from what is now, the oil place, Robeson, north to the Dobbs Ferry line. All along in there was very nice. Even people used to come down from the other way. And there was 3 bridges, and the third was by the Third Bridge. I remember it now. And we used to cross over on these bridges down to the river.
Walk across the tracks.
No, well, sometimes we used to, but sometimes you go over the bridge.
Over the bridges, right? Yeah,
and they would come down and down, steps going down. They're not there now. I don't remember. And there used to be a lot of people swimming there. We used to get every so often we'd get a big wooden reel from the Anaconda, and we'd get on it, huckleberry fin it up the river, or down the river, it was a lot of fun. And in the winter time also, we used to go on the ice floes. I can remember doing that. Kind of silly as I look back now, but we never thought about it at that time.
Who would you go with?
Boys that were my age, a little older maybe. My brother, who's about 3 years older than I, and we would go down there. Well, boys from town, several of them moved away. Nancy Caruso's husband, down to see Sammy. Just trying to think of some of the other guys. There's a fellow lived next to me on Whitman Street, Joe Pierce. These fellas all go down there. Just for life of me, I can't think of any of them.
That's okay.
And we would go down there, and there again there was the old boat down there, the four-master, and that was like more just as a breakwater for the oil ships that came up there. And the Anaconda was down there. Barges coming in and out with raw materials and stuff like that. We used to look at the paper and what the tide was. And the tide, it was especially clean when it went out, came back in, it was high tide, low tide. We used to go somewhere in between. That's what we used to read the paper for at those times. It was a lot of fun. Wave to the trains as they went by,
Now the importance of the tides was what?
So it was cleaner.
Cleaner when
That's
it was
when
out.
it was going out. And when it was coming in, but I can remember where you could see, it was clear, you could see the bottom, in some places. And it was more or less, some of the places were like coves where they were protected a little bit, but it was mainly rock along there. And you stepped down and you went swimming in the water. It wasn't that deep. I can remember it not being more than 3-4 feet out for 10-15 feet. We used to play around that way. There were diving places where a little deeper where they used to dive. Never went down the other side. South, past the Anaconda, where Harshaw was, or there was another name, chemical company down there. Zinsser. Never went down Zinser's.
Now when the tide came in, the water was dirtier. In what way was it dirtier?
Just, it would bring in the things that were floating in the water, reels from the cables, or every so often you get a dog floating around, and some other animal that drowned or something like that. The boats used to come down, and would give big waves, and have a grand old time with that. Other than that, it was very, very nice. It was very, just nice place to swim, I thought. I always thought that if they could have done something with it, it would have been nice, Just, but now, it's nowhere near as clean now. I've been down there, it's kind of murky.
And you mentioned you went down there with friends.
Yeah.
Were there people of all ages or just people your age?
No, all ages. There was older boys, high school seniors, we would go down.
How about adults?
Yeah, there was adults.
Men, women?
not women. I don't remember women there. In fact, I don't remember girls down there, my age or anything like that. It was mainly boys. There was older people. There's some men that went down there and regularly swam around.
I would like to back up and get to way back to your parents. Tell me their names, and if you know their birth dates and where they were born and that kind of thing. Okay. Dates and where they were born.
My father was born in Hungary, in a little town outside of the city of Munkacs. And he was born in 1899. And he was in the First World War in the Hungarian army, which was the wrong side. And after the war, he left, as did a great many people coming from Middle Europe, because it was so bad there. They were changing. He used to tell us stories of one day you'd wake up and you were Czechoslovakian territory. The next, you'd stay like that for 6 months, and then you were back to being Hungarian again, And each time they would come, they would take the people, like they wanted my father. Czechoslovakians came in and they wanted my father to go back into the army. They were drafting him. And when they started to do that, he says, I'll have none of this. And he more or less ran out on him. And
did he have to sneak out? Or?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Basically, he just left and he went to Hamburg. And in Hamburg, he came to this country. He had a brother here, or two brothers.
Where did he first come to?
To New York.
What part?
He came to the Lower East Side, Avenue B or C, one of those. My uncle was here already. Two uncles were here. One of which had a store in Hastings also.
Which was?
It was a dairy, Fountain Dairy was called. It was, he was one time at where Hastings Bouterie is, on the corner there, and then later he moved up the street to where Manor Market is, I think. And he had his little store there. And my other uncle, to go back, my uncle was here and he got my father a job with a friend of theirs who lived in Wallingford, Connecticut. And it was like everybody who came from a certain area would help each other. And these people had come at an earlier date to the United States, and they had a store in Wallingford, Connecticut. He went up there and he learned to be a butcher from this man, and he stayed with them. And then, being a young fellow, 18, 19 years old, he stayed with them, and then came back in 1923, 24, and he worked in Yonkers, and he worked for what was called Greenfield's Market, which was at the corner of Yonkers Avenue and Main Street, New Main Street. There used to be an overhead railroad that came into Yonkers that way. Part of the Putnam line, I think it was. He worked as a butcher there. And in 1927, he got married. February 6th, 1927. And my brother was born down there.
Let's leave your family at that point and go back now and trace your mother up to their
Okay.
marriage. Tell me about your mother.
My mother was born in 1904 in the United States. My
Where?
grandparents in, I believe, New York City. My grandparents were here for a few years, and in 1913, I believe it was, they went back to Hungary.
They were also from Hungary.
Yeah. From a different part of Hungary, Debrecen,
How
which
would you,
is
how would you spell that?
Debrecen. It was below Budapest, and it was far away from. And they went back there because my grandfather had gotten a job as an overseer on an estate of some sort, and he went back there, and they were stuck there for the war. War, and then after the war was over, they came back in the early 20s, 1920, and they came to Yonkers where they had relatives, and the relatives, being he was living in Yonkers, the relatives did a little matchmaking. And,
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
In fact?
Sure. Well, not really matchmaking. My father saw my mother. This is his side of the story. He said, "See that girl over there? I'm going to marry her." And my mother, being very tall, thin woman, very, real flapper type, my mother was 5'6.5", and my father was 5'7", but she looked at that time very tall, very nice looking. I see pictures of her, and they did a little courting and got married in 1927. My brother was born in the same year, December of the same year, and then they moved to Hastings about 11 months after I was born. And we lived, I guess.
What year again?
1930, it was about 1931. They moved here. They lived at 81 Rosedale. And then we lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to 1 Main Street, and that was the apartment house over the Hastings Stationery.
How long did you live in the first house, do you think?
I'm trying to think.
Well, I guess it's not too important.
No, there was another house in there too. That's what's throwing me off.
Well, that's okay. Did your father buy the butcher shop right away? Tell me the chronology of that.
He just opened up the store, and did business, hustled. He spoke Hungarian. There was a lot of Hungarians, and if you know Hungarian, you can speak to most any of those Eastern European countries, which was heavily populated with the Russians, and being that they were all back and forth there, Czech and Slavics, there's an awful lot of Slavics there. They came to him because he spoke their language. This was very important, and they sort of all go to each other, and he was a very hard-working man all his life, and he had, we never saw it as little children him working. The only time we would do it is sometimes on a Saturday. We would go to the store. It was a big treat for us. And he kept us mainly out of it. And But as we got older, getting into near the war years, with my brother being 12 and I'm being 9, we started doing little jobs in the store, and it evolved from there.
Okay, let's back up again. Your dad opens the store. You and your brother are born by this time.
Yeah.
So your life is mainly with Mom?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that. What did Mom do?
Mom did all the cooking, the washing, the cleaning, did everything. And we would not see our father until, a lot of times, till Sunday morning. It was very special time. We used to all get into bed. By that time, my sister came along also, 1934, and we would jump all over Daddy, and we would do things together on Sunday because he was home. And then,
so he was closed one day.
Yeah, Sunday. And that was, we used to go all places, do everything we had to. That was our time to go, and we would, I guess I don't remember in the early years where my mother used to go to the store and do her shopping too.
Would she shop in your dad's store then?
Oh yeah,
of course.
Sure. He would bring home. At the time, he being a butcher, at the time we used only kosher meat because my father was religious, and that was the way they used. And during the war years, the kosher butchers became out of hand, and my father couldn't see spending so much extra money when he had all the meat, meat that he could use. So he switched over, and that was the end of that. And but he found time to do things for. He started a little. Started a little Hebrew school.
Where was that held?
That was held in the VFW. A bunch of the Mr. Ryder, Dr. Ryder's father, and a couple of people from Dobbs Ferry. They all got together, and we had this. There was other people around. The Calendars, Jacobsons, Barron, all of these.
Rudin?
Who?
Rudin? R-U-D-I-N? Jack Rudin? No? Okay.
Never
I
heard.
thought he owned a store on the bridge, a dry goods store.
I know that name. I don't know.
Maybe it was earlier on. Okay.
There was a lot of different. Well, they used to hire a teacher to come up. He would teach us how to read and all these.
Was this for bar mitzvah?
No, it was just to go to a religious school, to see where your heritage is and everything like that.
Do you remember the year possibly that started?
I would say 1936 on, I would say, and when it came time for me to be bar mitzvah, that was 1943, I used to go to Yonkers, to a synagogue there, and it was taught by a teacher from that, and I was bar mitzvah in Yonkers, because we only had religious school and the high holy days over here. Anything else, you went to Yonkers. And there was several people from Dobbs Ferry that came down. Mr. Ryder's brother, several other people. But that's, so But my mother, we stayed with. She was the main disciplinarian.
Mm-hmm.
And if it already got to be to my father already, we were in hot water. My father being 5'7", weighed about 200 pounds, really built like, and doing it in a profession that was very very strong. You had to be extremely, and he was extremely powerful. I can remember being old, and he would grab me, and that was the end of it. Not hit me, never hit me. All he had to do was reach out with his hand, and if I moved, I was in trouble, double trouble. It was just discipline that he had gone through, so he in turn turned it on his children. In 1938, I believe it was, my grandfather came from Hungary. Grandfather was about 6 foot tall with a beard down to here.
Down to his almost
right down to
bottom
here.
Of his wrist.
Yeah, and tough. He almost hit my father. I mean, my father already was 38 years old, a man, He didn't care. He was ready to give him a slap, So he was a tough bird, let me tell you. That's the only thing I can remember about him. And he went back, and fortunately he passed on before the Holocaust. Went back in 39, and we found out later on that he had passed on in 1940.
Okay.
And thank God before the Holocaust and everything like that. And my father heard about it after the war from relatives that had survived. And my mother was a very fair woman. I mean, she had 2 lively boys and 1 girl. And like you say, the Jewish household, the firstborn boy is big time. The little girl is the baby. And I was left in the middle there. To fend for myself, but we had good times. My mother had really she molded us all what she wanted.
How?
Oh, she would never use that. I'm going to tell your father if you don't do this. I never can remember her doing that. She handled it in her own inimitable way, and if it already got to my father, we were in trouble, real deep trouble. And she had her parents were here, and they lived in the Bronx till the war, and then my grandfather passed on, and then my grandmother moved in with my uncle, who now still lives at Heath Place here. He could probably tell you quite a bit about that too.
What's his first name?
Bernard Klein, Heath Place. And he lived with us for a while he was working in the store also.
Your father's store?
Yeah. And he worked for me. He was here, lived with us before the war, and then he went into the army, and he came out and lived with us again, and then he got married, And my grandmother lived with him until she passed on. And
Tell me about your mother. When she was born here,
yeah,
moved to Hungary for a while, came back at
Yeah.
the end of the First World War. That would have made her about how old?
well, 1904, so it would be about 20 years old.
Okay. What did she do when she came back? Did she have a job?
As I tell you quite frankly, I think she had a job doing some sort of a seamstress work, but that was it. She became, she did a lot of sewing, so did it, but I can never remember her working at a job that, from the time that I could remember, she never worked. During the war, she helped out in the store a little bit because health situation was very bad. But that was the only time that I can ever remember. That
So
was
she
just
never had a job where she earned
never.
money, not even sewing for people in
Only
the home.
thing I can remember is vaguely that she did some before she was married.
Okay.
Because it's not, I never can remember any of them working, you know.
Any of who?
Any of women, a lot of women, let's put it that way, in that time. They were with their children, taking care of the whole house, doing a lot of, that was their job, I would imagine. Yeah.
How would finances? Do you remember your parents discussing finances in the home or in the business and how that was handled?
No. Never was in front of us that I can remember. We had everything we needed. We always had good shoes. We used to go to Yonkers, buy shoes, suits. We go down to the city. We needed suits for a particular holiday or something. For the holidays, we all got new clothes, you know. And we bought a lot of the clothes right, you know, from Mr. Ryder, who had his dry goods store there. That was it, you know. We never wanting for anything. If we needed something, we always had it. My father and mother was very vocal about school. I could never take off from school, you know, play hooky, so to speak. That was taboo. The teachers used to come in the store, my father's store. Where was Bob today? He would call up, is Bob going to school? If I was homesick, I was homesick. There was no fooling around like that. And that was that, you know.
So school was very important to them.
Very important. I mean, he wanted us all to do well, do good, and we went to school. That was it. And we got marks, good marks. We didn't have it. My father sent me to a tutor. I was tutored in arithmetic for a whole summer. After that, I knew everything. You know, it was very good. I needed it. That was it.
Did he ever elaborate on why an education was important for you?
More or less, he used to say mainly because I want you to be better in a better world than he came out of. I mean, he was brought up in times in Europe was very bad. Through the famine, 1912, 1911, the Great Famine, he spoke of that. My father was relatively short in a family of tall people. That's the only thing he could attribute it to. And they seem to say, I want you to do better than I. So that's why you have to go to school and learn and do things. But that's what.
Do you remember your mother voicing those similar?
Same thing. Same thing. Used to ask her, why do I have to? She said, I want you to be better than I. I said, we're living okay, We had the answers,
What about your mother's education?
She went to school in Europe. Both of her parents. Mother went to school in Europe. That was the only thing.
How much?
The complete cycle. She went, which was a rarity, so to speak, in those days, because a lot of people didn't. And
so she would have had the equivalent of a high school education here.
Graduated high school.
How was her English?
You mean now or?
Then, when she was very young.
She learned it and she spoke very well.
Did she read English also?
Yeah. But they talk between they talk between themselves, keeping something from us in Hungarian, but mainly spoken was English, because we were learning English in school, so they spoke it. My father had a little bit more pronounced accent than my mother, because my mother used to practice and try to talk, get away from the Hungarians with the V. Everything was V. You want to go to the in place of a W. She got over that. She read a lot, read an awful lot.
What kinds of things?
The magazines, Ladies' Home Journal, McCall's. She used to get the patterns and make dresses for my sister and herself and stuff like that. She did a lot of sewing. I could always remember her sewing, making my sister's dresses and some stuff for us, knitting, tablecloths, cross stitch. We have some of them here that she had made. She prided herself on doing the back as good as the front almost. You could tell it was the back. It was very nicely done. And that's, I think, an artist, And she was very good. Tried to be. She was very strong in what she used to mold my father into being a better father and being a good provider and everything like that. She used to give him the digs, and he used to go for it, If she wanted something, she got whatever she wanted. And, I can never remember them fighting, really, at all. I assume they must have, but I can never remember it. I don't know whether I blocked it out or what. But, they were always there when you needed them. Nice to come home when you came home from school. Your mother was there. Cookies and milk and stuff like that, We were, she was there for us, which was, I thought, very important.
Do you remember who their acquaintances were in their social life? Do you remember their social life?
They had the Riders. That's Dr. Ryder's father and mother. The Barons, Rose and Jack. The Smallheisers, who ran at the time, a garage, and later on became a jeweler. The Mr. Ryder's brother from Dobbs Ferry was sometimes included in, and let's see, that was my uncle, Harry, and Sadie, my Aunt Sadie, and they were like a group. Later on, Dr. and Mrs. Bender came in, and some. This was the more or less the nucleus.
What kinds of things would they do?
They would go out socially. They would get sometimes tickets and go into the city to a show. They would mainly play cards, the women bridge and the men poker or pinochle. And more or less backyard barbecues, just sitting around and talking, mainly.
And was that what you remember from when you were a child?
Yeah.
They did all those kinds of things. Also went into the city at that time?
Yeah.
How about, you were in the store as an older boy, about age 9 or 10. You started to work then in the store some?
Yeah, very, very little, because we had schoolwork and stuff like that. He didn't, but as we got older, became more or less, get 13, 12, 13, you're bigger, you did more. Used to go to the market with him in the morning. If there was no school that day, summertime a lot. Follow him around the market, he taught me the trade, And,
you said you worked there during the Second World War. Help was hard to get. Your mother also helped out. Could you tell me what your mother did?
Well, it was sort of like a supermarket with checking out, and she did basically that. And some other work counting ration coupons and stuff like that. You had to turn them in, or what you bought, count them, and mainly things like that. Very, just that was about it, checking out and stuff like that.
Now, she was in the store during those years. How were the interactions between the customers who came in and your mother?
I noticed that they didn't, they knew who she was, and they accepted her. I mean, she was a member of the community, and she used to come up to school whenever she used to meet some of the people that way. She had friends outside. I can remember people coming to the house, and, that were friends that she had met going to school a night, like that. But, that's all. Basically, they stuck between that group that I mentioned earlier. And they did things that way.
Okay, so it was mostly within the Jewish families within town.
Yeah.
Were there any, tell me about any relationships at all with the Christian members of the community?
Well, it's hard to say because there was a definite anti-Semitism, if you must. It was a definite something. We were different. They were all businessmen. And I think that a lot of people, not knowing any other religion, you come into a town like Hastings, which is predominantly, at the time, very strongly Catholic. I think that even the Protestants had trouble at time, and the Methodists, but I only noticed a change when I was a senior in high school, a change, like from 45, 46, when the boys were coming home from the Second World War, did I notice a change. Because the men were serving Europe and Japan, and had a buddy or a guy that was Jewish. He's the same as we are, you know. So they, you know, because of this, they kept mainly to themselves. They weren't accepted into anything, you know, because, you know, they were different. We were different. We had a different religion.
And a very small minority.
Yeah. And also probably somewhat jealous because the businessmen, they had money, made money during the war because of their working hard. I mean, my father did not drink, smoked a little bit, and most of the people were like that, you know. When you saw, my father was always dressed very nicely. We were always dressed very nicely. And you looked at some of the other boys, and they weren't dressed so nicely. And I can remember going to school and having my daily fight or altercation with some kid that called me a name.
What kind of a name?
Dirty Jew was a common. Maki, kike, well, the usual stuff.
Okay.
We got through it. It was predominantly older boys picking on younger, you know, that was the only thing. And we used to walk, I can remember walking to school with in back of Dr. Ryder and his brother, a lot, because they were big boys. And, you know, they were in high school, so if anybody called you, you had some help, because they lived on the same street nearby. And it wasn't, I think it was mainly, the whole thing was not knowing. If someone doesn't know anything, they sort of tend to shy away, and that makes us made us like an outcast. I mean, anything that's a minority, you know, that's the way I look at it now, looking back. But it was, we survived it, came out of it real good. As I said, that's why the people kept between themselves, you know. Very close friends with these people.
Now you said you noticed a change in 45 and 46. What, I don't quite understand, what was the change you
The change
noticed?
was that I feel that people started to know more things. Radio was, then came television a little bit later on, and you started to know and you were educated about these things. You were in the army, and you saw you had a Jewish guy used to, and you find out he was the same guy. He didn't have horns. He didn't have anything else different. And then they said, look, don't, you know, the attitudes changed. I don't know what else, you know, to say. Sure. To regarding that, you know, it's I think it'll always be that way if you're a minority. That's all. I mean, you just gotta live with it.
How was school for you then once you got there?
Very good. Very good. No, the teachers were very nice. I remember the teachers. A lot of the teachers were customers of my father's. I knew them from the store. My father knew them. They got a report every time from them, you know. My father and mother, my mother always went, if we, go up for a thing, my mother always went. My father got his report from the teachers in the store. That's the way it was. A small town, and it was very folksy,
What are your memories? I forgot you. I keep forgetting your birth date. I should have written it down. But do you have depression memories? Were you old enough to remember?
No.
No. You mentioned that there was religious instruction in the VFW hall.
Yeah.
Where were religious services held?
Also, VFW hall. They hired a cantor and a rabbinical student, and they set it up. My father was the chief sort of lay minister, or he was the highest lay person, Jewish. He set up everything, who would get honors and stuff like that. They have a whole session of procession. When you open the Torah, you vie for the first aliyah, the second aliyah, the third. Being a small community, everybody got, but who got the first one? I don't want the first one, you give it to him. And it was, and he was the chief man. He was the jelly that gelled them together. Strong, he was the fella that kept everything going. He used to sit there and, they need money for the, pay these fellas. They used to have a bidding at time, and they used to pay for this. Each one had to pay a certain amount. Trying to get the, so they could have school, they would collect money from all of the people in services. And there were a lot of people that came to services that was all you saw of them. That one time. And the women also, they decided not to have it Orthodox because they wanted the women to be a member of the, so they became, there's three basic groups, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. They decided to be sort of conservative, which was sort of middle of the road, because they realized that if they did it the other way, they wouldn't get anybody. If you're Orthodox, the women don't sit with the men. In fact, they sit up or back off to the side behind a curtain or something like that and do their prayers by themselves. They never meet. But they decided that women were going to be in it because they were strong in the home, and they had ideas too. They were very, very important part of the whole community. And that's what it was a whole little community. People. They stuck together, helped each other, did things for each other. What else?
remember when you were working in your father's store, who the customers were, from what parts of town?
Well, the customers he had a very good balance of customers. The village of Hastings was divided into basically three sections. It was the Manor, the Heights, and across the bridge. Now, Riverview Manor, from Broadway up, was the Manor, and the Heights was up here from like Five Corners and Farragut up here, and across the bridge was down Warburton Avenue. And these other sections of the town were basically just thrown in somewhere. But basically it was three sections. And my father had a very nice following from all segments. People from across the bridge remembered him from being across there, spoke to them in their native tongue. A lot of them never learned English to this day. And the Heights, a lot of the people there were smaller house, less affluent people, more or less blue collar, so to speak. And they were children of the people across the bridge, the older ones. They moved up in here. And other people moving in, just getting married, and they would, so the Heights, the Manor was the ritzy section, so to speak, where the big houses were, and there were some beautiful, beautiful homes up there. Bard Hill, all along there, there was people in there. I'm sure that you have all the things. A lot of people really famous people. The architect that built the Empire State Building, Richmond Shreve, was a customer of my father's. All of, and there was several other people that were quite wealthy that were there, and he treated them fairly. They treated him fairly. They became, it was more than a shopkeeper relationship, I think. They liked my father. He was very affable. Worked hard. They were very friendly toward him. And like I said, the Heights was working people, a lot of people from the Anaconda, the big president, the big higher office of the Anaconda lived up in the Manor.
About your mom.
Sure.
Did she wear any special clothing as part of her religion?
No.
You made reference to kosher meat. Did she then have a kosher house?
Yes.
Yes. And you mentioned some cleaning. Did she do cleaning herself, or did she have someone come in and help her?
She had a woman coming in, doing cleaning. Started out as once a day, progressed 2 times. A woman just recently passed away, and her daughter lives in town here, Helen Gunderson. Her name was Susie Bonac. Came to work for my mother when we moved to Hastings. And she worked for her on and off all the time up till she retired at 65. And Helen worked in the store since she was like 16. Worked for me, worked for us for like 30 years almost. And They were very fine people. I mean, Helen, I still see her around, you know. And, she works for Robert Jacobs Pharmacy in Yonkers. And she's been around. And we were very close. Susie worked for us. One of the things that prompted us to leave the stop with the kosher was that I wanted to have bacon. And she said, bring it home. And she didn't know this. And she brought it home, and my mother smelled it in the house. She goes, now what are you doing? And bacon for my, I was her Bob. And that was that. That got that out of the way.
Got kosher out of the household?
Yeah, more or less. You know, it was, and plus it was during the war, and it was very difficult to get kosher meat. When you got it, it was extremely expensive. And my father said, well, I got it there. Why not? He did that, but she was came here as an immigrant, and she went to work for us.
Where was she from?
She was from, I think, Czechoslovakia, if I'm not mistaken.
So, did your mother teach her then how to deal with the dishes and pots and pans and things?
Yeah, but she never, my mother was the boss. She did the cleaning and some of the cooking, but never, she would give her and say, do this. My mother did all the cooking, you know what I mean? And then Susie would do her cooking, like for us, her way, and they had dishes for that, you know what I mean? So, but she was doing it, you know, never forget that time. And we were very close to them. She came to all the different functions and stuff like that.
Was she Jewish also?
No. Very Catholic, Polish church. Got no problem. Never had any problem.
Sounds
with
like
that.
A nice relationship.
It was really nice.
About finances again. They never discussed them in front of you, but do you remember if your mom needed money to go get clothes or anything? Do you remember where that money came from?
Frankly, I don't ever remember. That's something that they were kind of tight-fisted about, you know. I mean, we always had money. My father was always done well, you know. He was a very hard-working man, and he always said. I remember that my mother shocked the pants out of half of Hastings when she got a mink coat. Man, you have a mink coat? People ask me, you have a mink coat? That was when, you know, not too many people had them, and that was a status symbol. And my mother had a mink coat, and then after that she always had a mink coat.
When did she get her first mink coat?
It was after the war, 46, 47, 48, something like that. And then we lived on Whitman Street. She had this. People came in the store, and some people were very mad about it, you know, and showed it. They must have been cheating us all these years, and you know. Please, I guess jealousy. But I remember that. My mother was a very stately woman, always very nice to everybody. soft-spoken, but don't cross it.
The first apartment that they moved into and subsequent apartments, I'm assuming they were apartments. Is that right or is that incorrect?
Well, we lived in Yonkers in apartments for the, I obviously don't remember it. They showed me where they lived. Pelton Street in Yonkers and Saratoga Street in Yonkers, and then they moved to Hastings, and we lived in a house, an old house, 81 Rosedale. And from there they moved to another apartment, and then we moved from there. I believe we moved to Travis Place then, which is that little street off Broadway, and then from there to Whitman Street, which was most of the time that I can remember. This was like from right through the war years as I was growing up. That was mainly the house that I remember. And it was, we backed up to the Catholic school. We played ball with all the kids in the street at the Catholic school. Kids are kids, you know. Pick on you today and pick on him tomorrow.
Exactly. Well, I've run out of questions. I think we've covered everything pretty nicely. Can you think of anything that you might like to add?
I think that I can't think of anything else. If you would lead me on, I would probably go further. You know, I remember, you know, things from childhood, things that I wanted, and I pretty near, you know, if I wanted something that was really frivolous, I didn't get it. If I wanted something that was good, I always got it, you know. I only wish that I had saved some of my toys. I could be a millionaire from them. You know, that's the big thing now. Toys from the 30s, you know, and I had them all. And I can remember living and going into the store. The Warburton Avenue was the main road going up north. Route 9 went right down Warburton Avenue, and there was big trucks, milk trucks, coming down to supply the milk for New York City, and they were all coming through that little town, and you wonder how the heck they ever did it, you know. And then the thruway was built, and all. It was amazing, you know. The Anaconda was there. We used to. They would give away a big ham every Christmas. My father used to get the order. We would be busy with that, you know. All the people would, you know, a lot of people from the Anaconda worked there. That was a very, very important thing at that time.
For your father's store.
For the store, for the town, you know. And, you know, with automation and less people. At one time there was almost 3,000 people working down there. And they drew the people from Middle European who did that in Europe, and they came over here and they did the same thing. Because the factories were the same, basically. And there was a lot of, you know, talking to these people in their native tongues. Some of them, till the day they died, never spoke English. And they knew that if they came to my father, they could talk with someone, you know.
You mentioned, that's real interesting about the hams, because I had heard about Anaconda's very generous gifts of hams at Christmas.
Well, at that time it was a big thing. And they weren't skimpy little hams, you know. They were good-sized hams, I remember.
Did they come to your father's store to pick them up? How
No.
was that handled?
We bought them. There was a big, in Yonkers had a big Armour or Swift was in Yonkers. They came into there, and then they put them all on a truck and took them down to the factory and gave them out. As each one came on and one came off, they took them home as they went home, and they came down with the refrigerated trucks at that time. It was, people were doing all kinds of things about changing them for other food, and stuff like that. And,
What do you mean changing them for
well,
other food?
if a person didn't want the ham, they would come in and he would give them a turkey,
Exchange it.
yeah. Or they wanted another one, they would, some of them got more. We used to have this business. It was, being that they got it there, people used to come in, Christmas was always a big, big time for us. Turkey, hams. I never tasted that until, like I said, it was maybe 16 or 17 years old. To this day, some of the dietary things still stick with you. I don't drink milk with meat, which was taboo at that time. I just can't. Just don't do it. I eat ham, and I eat pork, and I eat everything. But things I don't do, certainly. And my father taught me the business. And when he passed away, I took over and ran it for a few years. But times had changed. The shopping center, Central Avenue. And from a primary, the towns became secondary. You can see it by the way all the towns are. You want something, food or anything, you go Central Avenue. You want something, just, you gotta pick up a paper or something like that. That's where you go. Times have changed. But this has been a good town, nice town. I don't think I'd stayed here if it was. Lived here all my life except for 2 years in the Army. My wife's from Yonkers. We lived here. My children all went through the school system, just like mine. Some of them got the same teachers that I had. One of them is still walking around. I see Miss Jones. She must be active in this. Miss Jones. I see her around. She must be in her 90s. Still see her walking around, and she don't look too much different when we're having our 40th reunion pretty soon in the fall, November 11th. 40 years out of high school. This woman was teaching there, and she looked old then. I see her walking around.
Her last name is Jones?
Yeah. Grace Jones? Miss Jones.
She high school? Elementary?
High school, she was a 12th grade English teacher. 11th and 12th grades.
Could she be married now, have a different name?
No. Oh, it was Miss Jones. No. There was a whole bunch of teachers that still were around.
Well, that's very nice. I want to thank you very much.
Okay, anytime.
It's a great contribution. Thank you.
Glad to